Everyday injustice.
Today on Everyday Injustice, we have two of my favorite people. We have Bill Bastuk from It Could Happen to You, and Jeffrey Deskovic, who wears a ton of hats, but he's with the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation. So welcome to the show, both of you.
Thank you very much. And just quickly mentioning, one of those extra hats is also an advisory board member of It Could Happen to You. And I do want to give a shout out to an organization near and dear to your heart, as well as mine, David, Restorative Justice International, which I also serve as their a global advisory council person.
So I actually wanted to start by going into both of your backgrounds a little bit, because you guys have probably two of the more interesting histories. So I'm hoping kind of briefly, each of you could kind of tell your story and how you got to this point, and then we can talk about what we're doing now.
Well, since I introduced myself to Jeff, I got started on this in this area of criminal justice reform somewhat unexpectedly. I had been in public policy and for about 40 years, worked for the New York State Legislature, was working, had done some healthcare reform work, some work in the area of environmental reform, and had the opportunity to serve in the Monroe County Legislature up here in upstate New York, and also on my town board after that, the Rennequay Town Board. And in 2008, I got a call from the Monroe County Sheriff's Department. They wanted me to help them with a case that they were looking into. I agreed to meet with them. I had no problems with working with law enforcement. And to cut to the chase, which they did not do during our discussion, but about 40 minutes into our discussion, they told me that a 16-year-old girl had accused me of raping her in a shed. From that point on, next day I retained a lawyer. He lawyered me up, and he basically told me, here's what's going to happen to you. You're going to be indicted. Well, you're going to be arrested. You're going to be indicted. You're going to go to trial, and I'm going to have to fight like hell to keep you out of prison for the next 20 years. And I said, well, how can that be? You know nothing about this case, about these allegations. And he said, because that's the way the system works. You are guilty until proven innocent. So don't believe you're innocent until proven guilty. It took me a year to get to trial, just as he had predicted. It cost my wife and I $150,000 in our retirement savings. And in May of 2009, after I was acquitted, I decided that what happened to me happens to a lot of other people. And my defense attorney told me that one day in court. And I decided that I would take what I knew about bringing about public policy reform and zero in on criminal justice reform. And I quickly learned too that in the halls of Albany, New York, there had not been a lot of serious substantive criminal justice reform for about 15, 20 years. I'm talking about areas of discovery and bail reform, videotaping, and all that was a very slowly moving process. And the reason why was twofold. One is the District Attorneys Association of the state of New York ruled with an iron thumb, basically dictated to the assembly members and to the state senators what legislation would be passed relating to law enforcement and criminal justice and what would not be. And if they exceeded their threshold, then they would get threatened by the DAs in terms of not getting endorsed when they're in for reelection. I also came to realize that, and Jeff and I both came to realize this, was that the average Joe on the street does not understand criminal justice. And that basically the only people advocating for criminal justice reform were the criminal defense community, mainly public defenders and private sector criminal defense lawyers. What we did was we built a broad, diverse coalition that it brought in, with Jeff's assistance, the exonerees, those who have been wrongfully, who are wrongfully convicted, the wrongfully prosecuted, such as myself, unions, teachers, the faith community, and built this non-traditional coalition that the senators and the assemblymen started to hear about and hear from, much to the chagrin of the prosecutors. The result of that was the passage in June of 2018 of the New York legislation establishing the New York State Commission on Prosecutorial Conduct. This is the first commission in the nation. We hope it'll be in place in the coming year. There are some structural changes that are being made to the legislation in the form of amendments. But prosecutors need to be held accountable too, not only police officers. And that's our point. We are really the only national coalition that zeroes in on what we call a new culture of accountability in criminal justice, establishing consequences for prosecutors when they break their own rules, giving the public a place to go to file a complaint against prosecutors. And we are now on the verge of initiating, or have initiated, a campaign in the state of California to establish the California Commission on Prosecutorial Conduct, which will be the focus, one of the primary focuses of a virtual summit that we'll be doing October 9th from 6 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. California time. Jeff will both be active participants on that virtual summit. It's open to anybody, not just folks from the state of California. Anybody across the country can join in that summit. And I'll talk more about the details of that later, but there will be a panel on prosecutorial misconduct in the state of California, and there will be a panel on bringing to an end deaths by execution in the state of California. And those are two of the more important panels, as well as a panel on raising the age for incarceration, for youth incarceration with adults. And State Senator Nancy Skinner will be on that panel. And we'll have other California exonerees, such as Jamel Truelove and Gloria Killian. With that, turn it over to Jeff.
I knew
Sure,
if I
so-
asked him one question, he'd jump on to questions 2, 3, and 4 as well. So let's go back and have Jeff kind of introduce his background too.
Yeah, so in a nutshell, so I'm a criminal justice advocate. I'm the founder of the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation for Justice. And, you know, our goal is to exonerate the wrongfully convicted, which we've freed 7 people, and also pursue policy changes. So really quickly, we were able to pass laws in New York pertaining to identification reform, videotaping interrogations, and DNA database expansion. You know, I joined the advisory board of It Could Happen to You shortly after Bill formed the organization. We've been working together ever since. It's been a really long time. And, you know, the foundation now, for the most part, does all of its policy work through the coalition. And we found that to be more effective than the go it alone approach, which is what a lot of the organizations, including us, did previously. I do have a master's degree from John Jay College. My thesis was written on wrongful conviction, cause, and reform. And I have a law degree also from the Elizabeth Hobbs School of Law at Pace University, where I graduated May 2019. So I'm pending admission to the bar right now. I do a lot of different advocacy, from media interviews to writing. I have a lot of op-eds and individual articles from when I was a columnist. I do speaking engagements. I regularly meet with the elected officials. And then as an individual, I also endorse in political races. But I come to all of this advocacy work and, even the advisory work I do with Restorative Justice International, because like Bill, I'm with what's termed a first person advocate. So meaning that I was wrongfully imprisoned myself. I served 16 years in prison. I was 16 when I was arrested. I turned 17 by the time the trial got started, which I was wrongfully convicted of a murder and rape. I served 16 years in prison prior to being exonerated 14 years ago through DNA testing, which not only exonerated me, but also identified the actual perpetrator. And my life's dedicated now to fighting wrongful conviction and also broader criminal justice reform.
Very good. So Bill had already mentioned kind of starting the Prosecutorial Misconduct Commission in New York. Maybe you guys can talk a little bit more about what that does, why we need such a thing, and why you guys are considering bringing it to California.
Well, let me just quickly say that prosecutorial misconduct was a factor in my wrongful conviction. There's many causes of wrongful conviction in general. One factor that runs through all of them is, whether it's a conviction is caused by a coerced false confession or misidentification or a lying informant. The one cause that runs through all of those is frequently prosecutorial misconduct. So there is no oversight for prosecutors now. They, except for California, where it's an e-felony, withholding exculpatory evidence is not a crime. They're shielded from civil liability by this doctrine called prosecutorial immunity, which means it doesn't matter how serious the misconduct is, you can't sue them in court. I tried to do that anyway, and that part of my federal lawsuit was dismissed. They had no oversight from the Bar Association or the Grievance Committee. They were totally ineffective. Out of all the wrongful convictions, my case and many others, prosecutors were never called to account. So we saw a need to have an oversight vehicle. And its importance is because there was no oversight, so they were running wild. The commission, in terms structurally, and I'll yield the floor in a minute for Bill to jump in, but some of the key features of the commission is that anybody can file a complaint, that the complaints are anonymous, that the commission can take up a matter on its own. And that's that's important because a lot of defense lawyers weren't filing complaints because they were worried about retaliation against them and against their future clients in the form of not getting plea bargain agreements and that they otherwise would have extended to them. And they knew that nothing was going to happen anyway. So my lawyer told me when I wanted to file a complaint against the prosecutor, he told me that it would be a waste of time and money. So I never got any type of justice. So there's that. It investigates, it has subpoena power, and they have an expertise. So, I mean, as Bill often says, grievance committees and the Bar Association, they're really there more for stuff like lawyers commingling funds and misconduct by non-prosecutorial lawyers. So that's what the need for it is. And I'll yield the floor to Bill.
Well, on September 1st, the National Registry of exonerations issued a report. And this is out of the University of Michigan Law School. And since 1989, up until this point in time, there have been over 2,400 recorded wrongful convictions. What their study found, this was a very, very detailed study. I've got a copy of it. It's about 300 pages. Well, but in summary, what they found was that in those 2,400 cases, there were approximately 34% were due to police misconduct, and another 30% due to prosecutorial misconduct. And probably another 5 to 10% involved joint police and prosecutorial misconduct. That's them working together to make sure that they have their house in order to get the conviction they so desire. There's two very scary facts in that. One is that 93 of those cases, those individuals were on death row, and their convictions were overturned shortly before they were executed. They were wrongfully convicted, and they could have wrongfully been executed. The second point is that in only 4% of those cases, involving 34% prosecutorial misconduct, in only 4% of those cases was any punishment given or extolled on any of the prosecutors involved. And those were very mild sanctions. In fact, 3 of those prosecutors were simply disbarred. In the absence of consequences for prosecutors who break their own rules, and in the absence of any oversight, given the fact that the prosecutor's goal is to win at all causes in many DA offices, there's no disincentive for them not to cheat. There's no disincentive for them not to withhold evidence. There's no disincentive for them not to lie to the jury in opening and closing statements. There's no incentive for them to basically get a witness to lie on the stand. In every other profession that we know of, a banker, a real estate agent, a doctor, there's oversight. There's oversight to ensure that those professionals are not breaking their professional codes of conduct. The most powerful people in the criminal justice system, the prosecutors, have no oversight. I'll tell you, if I get a chance to come back in a second life, I want to come back as a prosecutor because I can do anything I want. All right. So we not only see this as a body that will investigate true prosecutorial misconduct, but it will serve as a deterrent against prosecutorial misconduct and thus help prevent wrongful prosecutions, wrongful convictions. And the commission, by the way, is modeled on the New York State Commission on Judicial Conduct. It's been in place for 40 years. And one of the arguments that we were able to make to the legislators, and one of the common sense arguments we were able to make, is that if there's an oversight body for judges, why shouldn't there be an oversight body for prosecutors? And so our mission over the course of the next 5 years is really to establish a state commission on prosecutorial conduct in every state in the nation. New York State was one of the first states to establish the Commission on Judicial Conduct, and now most states have some form of oversight to monitor the conduct of judges. And we see that same trend taking place.
So in terms of like California, just, wrongful conviction is a national problem and prosecutorial misconduct is a natural problem. So even though Bill and I don't live in California, for example, we're not any less concerned about prosecutorial misconduct in California or in any of the other states in the country, and hence our foray, into California, as well as Pennsylvania, and we'll be expanding into other states in the future.
In fact, Jeff, picking up on that, yes, we're going to be working on establishing a commission in the state of Pennsylvania, and we are laying the groundwork too to establish grassroots campaigns, hopefully beginning in January, if not before the end of the year, in the state of Washington and in the state of Oregon. So we'll really have a Pacific Coast campaign going.
And I think, it's important for people to understand, especially out here in California, this is a problem that is pretty deep out here. So now this report is a decade old now, but I don't think anything's changed. Our friend Maurice Pausley in 2010, working with the Innocence Project up in Santa Clara, came out with a report, and they examined 707 cases over an 11-year period, and they found that only 6 prosecutors were disciplined out of those 707 cases that found prosecutorial misconduct. And I can tell you, having been watching the courts over the last 10 years, I can't think of a single prosecutor that I know of in the 3 counties that I've worked in that's been sanctioned for prosecutorial misconduct. Oh, sure, if they don't pay their bills or they embezzle money, they get hammered. But for actual misconduct that puts people in jail, I haven't seen anything.
Yeah, in terms of the, in terms of, October 9th, the Pathways Culture to Accountability Summit. So the way that it could happen to you works is that, we build coalitions, So, Bill and I are common to the chapters in New York, PA, and California. The rest of the people, for the most part, are just working particularly in the state that they're from. So, we usually do like a summit, and we have other periodic events, and we invite stakeholders to, and people to join with us. So those are, as Bill mentioned, those are exonerees, people falsely accused but acquitted, but also all the criminal justice reform organizations, no matter what issue they're working on, they're all invited, and work in the coalition, individual advocates, friends and family of people who allege they're wrongfully imprisoned, formerly incarcerated people, and just concerned everyday citizens. So we build statewide coalitions, and we work systematically, and there's subcommittees, and we divide up the work, and so it's a really inclusive thing. So in general, concerned citizens that want to work for justice reform, unless they're going to be a volunteer at a nonprofit, and their capacity for managing them is limited. So there's not really a way for an average Joe or Jill to get involved. But our coalition model offers a way for people, just ordinary everyday people, no particular skills, can join our coalition and help in whichever way that's open to them. And that's what makes it more difficult for the elected officials to ignore us, but because we are statewide, we do build statewide coalitions. And even when we're meeting with the elected officials, we divide people up, and say I lived in XYZ district, then I would meet the elected officials in XYZ district, and we would make sure everybody in the group that was from a particular area meets with that elected official. So we do that, and that's how we've been effective. And so we're taking a blueprint which had worked in New York, and we're applying it. And one of the fortunate things, this is why I like working with Bill. So, I can make outreach to the exoneree community, and, my case is an illustration, and often I can help generate media, and the other exonerees from that state can, that's where my strength comes in, and doing some of the strategizing. Bill's good at strategizing also, not so much in those other areas, but what he does bring to the table is he has like an inside baseball knowledge of the inner workings of politics at a level that I simply don't have. So we really complement each other very well. And that's why I like working with him. A lot of the moves that, we made over the years and getting legislation passed in New York, I wouldn't have knew to make those moves or how to go about it. So we complement each other, and that's what really being in a coalition is about. It's about working together.
So I just want to add that we anticipate beyond Senator Skinner, having some other state senators and assembly members participating in the summit, and having a number of key legislative councils as well. We are getting some of those confirmations, but the legislative councils in the area of criminal justice reform. And one of the things that we do is work very, very closely with the councils because they're actually very much the brains behind writing the legislation, making sure that there's no constitutional challenges in the legislation. Some of the other panel members, by the way, David will be on a media panel. We'll be having a panel known as the influence and the impact of media in bringing about criminal justice reform. And in addition to David, we'll be having Martin Yant, who was an award-winning journalist until he became a private investigator. He's done a lot of work on examining wrongful convictions. We'll be having Gary Craig from Gannett Rochester newspaper, Rochester, New York newspaper up here in New York State. Gary's an award-winning criminal justice reporter. On the eliminating executions panel, as we call it, will be Amy Ralston-Pova. Amy is president and founder of the Can Do Foundation. Amy has been advocating on behalf of prisoners seeking clemency for over 20 years. She was granted clemency by President Clinton in on July 7th, 2000. She's an award-winning journalist and a filmmaker. So we've got a very, very interesting panel. We have 6 panels, each of which will have 4 or 5 members on it. And we anticipate having a very interactive audience. There'll be the opportunity for folks to really participate. And after the summit, we want to take these participants and use that to really build an army, not only in the state of California. I want to emphasize that this is not only open to those in the state of California, it's open to anybody interested in New York, in Florida, in Texas, who wants to look at basically holding prosecutors accountable and other areas of criminal justice reform. Please join in, because you'll be able to learn about what's taking place in California. We'll be talking about some of the lessons that we learned here in New York in the campaign. And one of the lessons we learned is that you can't trust the prosecutors in terms of the arguments that they're going to make to the legislature.
So I want to mention that, it could happen to you. One of the things we do is we have a Minister of Justice Award. So at the California Summit, San Francisco DA Chesa Boudin will be receiving the award, of course, noting, his establishing the post-conviction unit and the Innocence Commission within the District Attorney's Office and other criminal justice reform initiatives that he enacted, fulfilling his campaign promise when he ran for San Francisco DA. So, he'll be doing that. That's one of the things that it could happen to you. We do in each state. We give that award out. There'll be other exonerees as well. Some of them will be Gloria Killian, Herman Atkins, Jamal Trulove, amongst other exonerees. So on each panel, we'll have at least one exoneree as well, because I think, it's important to have just, the statistics, and people experience in the field, but then also having somebody, who's been wrongfully convicted previously, and it all kind of brings, everything to life.
I see Bill walked away for a sec, but how do people sign up? How can they get involved in this?
So there's an Eventbrite link, which I'll send to you, David, and maybe you'll link, can include that underneath of it. However, technologically you do that. This technology is not my strong suit, but we're looking for people to register, register on Eventbrite, and we're actively promoting it on social media and our listservs.
Is there a cost?
No.
Well, what we're asking for is a minimum $5 donation. Folks can feel free to donate more if you can't afford the $5, and especially if you're a student or you're on fixed income, it's free. And there's also the opportunity to become a sponsor if you go to the link. If you're an organization that would like to, these campaigns are costly. The district attorneys, by the way, doesn't cost them anything to go to Sacramento and to fight against criminal justice reform, because they do it on the taxpayer's dollar. But we have travel costs, we have media costs, we have printing costs, and California is a very, very big state. So this will likely be a very costly campaign. And if you're a union or you're a businessman and you want to put up a few bucks and become a sponsor of this, during the breaks and during the lunch breaks, we'll be giving the sponsors the opportunity to say a few words, and also have a certificate of appreciation that we'll be presenting them. There's a $250 sponsor level, and there's a $500 sponsor level.
So what time does this conference run from?
It'll begin, the conference actually begins at 9 a.m. Pacific time, okay? And will end at 3:30 p.m. Pacific time. But what we'd like to do also is from 8 to 9, folks can get on the Zoom link, get on the webinar link, and talk to one another. We'll just have basically some virtual networking over our own coffee in our home offices or at home, and let people get to know one another a bit. We'll have the exonerees on, hopefully, and get to know them and let them tell their stories a little bit. So if you can tune in at 8 a.m. I'm going to Rochester. Jeff's generally up at 3 a.m. Sometimes he doesn't go to bed at night. So
I do advocacy around the clock. But Bill, what I would like you, could you, just for the benefit of people watching that are going to tune in from a state other than California, so could you just state the start time, for example, in Eastern Standard Time, like on our time in New York? Could you state the start and end time?
The start time in New York would be 6 a.m. The start
I don't think that's right, Bill. We're 3 hours ahead of California. So if it starts at 9 in California, it would start in New York at 12.
Oh, excuse me. Thank you, Jeff.
I like to correct you.
Okay. Well, that's good. Now I realize I don't have to get up at 5 a.m.
Now, let me ask you guys this.
Wait, let him state the time in Eastern Standard Time, the start and stop time, though, before you move to the question, David.
Yeah. So in Eastern Standard Time, we'll be starting at noon, and it'll be concluding at approximately 6:30. In Central Time, I believe we'll begin at 11 a.m. Central. Okay, so for anybody out in Colorado, for example, who wants to join in at 11. So
No, Colorado is 10.
Thank you for the
Colorado.
correction.
Yeah. So for those who are probably going to be working on a Friday, how can they catch it later? Is there going to be a recording of it that they
Yes.
can
Yes,
join?
yes. It'll be taped. We'll have a link to it, and the agenda is posted on the registration link, and it's probably very likely that folks may want to tune in and tune out to different workshops in different areas that they have an interest in.
And then one final question for you guys, which is, how can people get involved, get in touch with you guys in general? So if they want to be part of the Prosecutorial Misconduct Commission in California or other states, how would they get involved?
Well, they can go to our website, which is itcouldhappen2u with the numeral 2.org. So that's itcouldhappen2u numeral 2.org. They could email me directly at itcouldhappen@Rochester. It's ROCHESTER.RR.com. Or I'm always open to a phone call I have no problems giving out my cell phone number at 585-503-6826. And I'd be happy to discuss criminal justice reform in your state or in your municipality. Just remember, prosecutors must be held accountable too.
In terms of me, the website, deskovic.org, deskovic.org. It Could Happen to You does have a what's called the Wednesday Watch of Injustice, which comes out every Wednesday. And so if somebody would like to sign up for that, they should just email Bill, and he'll cause their name to be added to that listserv to get that issue delivered to them to their email every Wednesday.
Jeff, thanks for mentioning that. And actually, we're going on our 490th consecutive Wednesday watch very, very shortly.
Well, very good. We will post the links to both the Eventbrite page and It Could Happen to You on the YouTube video and the podcast. I want to thank our guests, Bill Bastuk and Jeffrey Deskovic, for coming today. This has been Everyday Injustice. I'm your host, David Greenwald. Join us again next time for more tales from the injustice system.
Thank you, David. We'll see you on October 9th.
Looking forward, David. Always a pleasure.